I feel bad because I wish we could have I told him to stay at his mom's house. Don't go anywhere, stay at your mama's house. And he's like, yeah, and he didn't.
My body just seemed like it was burning up along with him. I was on fire. My body was burning up because my baby was being burnt up at the time, and it hurt. It was like all part of me was gone. And it's still gone. I miss my baby.
One man was shot multiple times in the torso in an apartment. Another man was tortured in an apartment and then left in a ditch. And what do these men have in common? Car keys, a set of car keys. This is the story of Courtney Palmer. Now, before I get into Courtney Palmer's story, just know that this is going to be very detailed. And yes, all the details are necessary in order for you to fully grasp how ridiculous the demise of the victim was. And there's also a 2-part episode of this story on the show, The First 48. Feel free to check it out as well if you want. Courtney Glenn Palmer was born in Los Angeles, California on Friday, June 18th, 1993 to his dad, Aaron Palmer Jr. and his mama, Deborah Wooden. They stayed in California until Courtney was 9, and then they moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where he finished school. Courtney was described to be pretty creative. He knew how to turn anything into the figure of a car. Give him any items or material, and he'd build a car for you, which I find to be a pretty neat talent to have. But not only that, Courtney was said to have been hilarious and a complete joy to have around. Like, if you were having a bad day, that all went away when Courtney came around because he'd have you laughing so hard. He was also said to have been a loving father himself. He had children of his own and was described to have loved his children dearly. However, at the same time, at some point along in life, Courtney kind of slipped through the cracks. It was already a struggle navigating his day-to-day life, as according to him, he was diagnosed with ADHD, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. But he also ran into several issues with the law. According to police who were familiar with Courtney, he was gang affiliated. He abused drugs, which was clearly detrimental to his mental health. He was previously arrested for assault and had some traffic violations. But even with his history, police still spoke to his character underneath all that. They say Courtney was a good kid and believed that he just kept the wrong company around him and had the potential to make something of himself. Unfortunately, he'd never be afforded the chance to ever prove that to himself, to his children, the authorities who believed in him, or anybody who believed in him. Tuesday evening, November 8th, 2016. Police officers were cruising the streets when they heard gunshots go off at the Tamarick apartment complex in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They rush over to the area when they pull up to the scene and they see a man suffering from multiple gunshot wounds to the upper torso, holding on for dear life. So they, of course, get the wounded man to medical help and he was rushed to St. Francis Hospital. The man named who was shot was 39-year-old Carl Harris, also known as Duke. When he got to the hospital, the doctors said it wasn't looking too good for him, but they hauled him into surgery anyway in efforts to save his life. While still on the scene, police began asking questions to the people who were out there standing around to see what had happened, but no one could say why this happened, who did it. Everybody was confused. But one person who was out there who may have been able to provide some clarity was Carl's girlfriend. She had been standing in the parking lot, so officers asked her to go with them to the station so they could interview her in hopes of getting more information on what happened. So Carl's girlfriend tells police that she and Carl was in the house, they was chilling, doing their own thing. And Carl's friend was over there with them when he needed to borrow Carl's vehicle, a gold Monte Carlo. The friend being Courtney Palmer. So she tells police that Courtney leaves, and when he comes back to her and Carl's house, he comes back without the car keys. And so she says that's when Carl asks Courtney, like, okay, where's my car keys? where's my car? And this is when Courtney tells him that somebody took the keys from him, and he tells him where he was when the keys were taken. She says that when Carl asks her to take him over to the apartment complex so he could see what's going on and get his keys and car back, Courtney went with them. So boom, it's the girlfriend, Carl, and Courtney. They all get in the girlfriend's car. They head on over to the apartment complex. Once they get there, they see the vehicle sitting in the parking lot in the same spot that Courtney had parked it. So they all get out the car, and Courtney points out a specific apartment, telling Carl that the people who took the keys from him were in this specific apartment. So now Carl walks up to the apartment, and according to the girlfriend, he didn't have no weapons on him or nothing like that. He just went up to the apartment and he starts knocking on the door. She can see Carl knocking on the door, and she can see that somebody from inside opened the door. She doesn't see who. But the people who opened the door started talking to Carl. They're talking to each other. She doesn't know what's being said because she was still outside on the sidewalk. But she could see that they were talking and that Carl had gone inside of the apartment. At that point, she's thinking, okay, they're going to give him his keys, no big deal. But then that's when she hears gunshots go off. Now at that point, her, Courtney, and whoever else that was out there took off running. But then she's like, oh my God, my man. So she turns back around, and that's when she sees Carl walking out the house. But she described him as walking like real slow. So she starts panicking, and she's asking him like, oh my God, did you get shot? And Carl's like, yeah. And he just drops to the floor. Now, as she's sitting there talking to the investigator, she gets a phone call that miraculously Carl was in stable condition. He survived the shooting. After giving her detailed perspective, investigators felt like she was being truthful about what she knew to have happened to Carl, so they didn't suspect anything fishy on her behalf, and they let her go. So now this is where we see Courtney come into the station to give his account of what happened since he was right there. Now, I told you police were already familiar with Courtney and were pretty fond of him despite his shortcomings, so when Detective White comes into the interview room, he and Courtney exchange greetings, but you can visibly see that Courtney was fidgety and anxious. Detective White tells him, have a seat, and Courtney declines. He says he can't because he needs to walk back and forth because of his ADHD bipolar.
Come on, bro, sit down and talk to me.
How you been?
I've been doing fine.
Sit down, man. Relax.
No, I gotta walk back and forth because I'm ADHD bipolar.
And he admits that he hadn't had any of his medication that day. And throughout this interview, Courtney's behavior is just very uneasy. He's anxious. He's rocking back and forth. He's sitting on the floor. He's standing up. At one point, when Detective White left the room and came back, Courtney's shoes was off. Pants was off, sprawled out on the floor. And he was in there literally barefoot with just his t-shirt and basketball shorts on. He was saying that he was hungry, so they gave him a bag of some vanilla sandwich cookies, and he asked for a cigarette, I'm assuming to calm his nerves, so they brought him one, and he was hyped behind that. He even laid on the floor at one point, like lay down as if the floor was a bed, so it just speaks to him not having his medication on top of being high. The detective said Courtney was actually high on PCP when he came in to speak with them. But moving right along, when Detective White comes in, Courtney's hyped. The first thing he says is, all right, where you want me to start? Should I go all the way back to 2006 or what? Clearly indicating that he's ready to spill a whole lot more than what happened to Carl. And Detective White is like, well, let's just start with tonight. So immediately Courtney is like, I had nothing to do with what happened. I would never set Carl up.
Where y'all want me to start from? 2006 or 2000 what?
How about tonight?
Tonight, Carl was just trying to help me. He went in the house for me.
I know.
And I want to prove to that I did not set him up.
And I'm assuming that Courtney wanted to make that clear because he knew that it could have appeared that way. And he actually spoke very highly of Carl. He considered him to be a friend. He said that Carl was always trying to help him so he could do the right thing for his kids. And Detective White asks him, like, why was Carl even at the apartment complex? And Courtney says so he could get his car keys back. He said a woman is the one who took the keys from him and said that Carl never banged on the door. He just knocked on the door. And that's when a short man came to the door. And when he came to the door, Carl addressed the man, and the man told him to chill because there was kids in the apartment. And then boom, gunshots go off.
Is he dead?
No. The last time I heard he was stable, so that's good.
Okay. He's a healthy man too. He eats a lot. All Duke do is just help me out. Want me to do the right thing for my daughter.
First thing I want is I want to help your friend tonight. You go over there to that apartment. Why'd you go over there?
There's Carl wanted his car keys back.
And
Courtney
you
says
guys were up
Carl's
there
keys
hitting
were
on the
taken
door,
from him earlier
or he was.
by a woman in the
Carl knocked on the
complex.
door. He didn't hit on the door. He knocked on the door.
What's her full name?
He gives White her
Some little
name.
guy came out and said, "Hey,
Okay, so you go over to that apartment.
Everybody pushed to the back room.
You guys were up there hitting on the door.
And that's
or
when
he
gunshots
was.
started firing.
Carl knocked on the door. He didn't hit on the door. He knocked on the
Where
door.
were you when that was going on? I was standing right behind
Some
you.
little
And he tells the detective that the man who shot Carl was someone named Teddy. Now, this is when we see Courtney expressing how much fear he was in for his life. He told the detective how he was nervous and that he needed the detective's help with getting out of state and going back to California to his sister's house, because if he didn't, his life was going to be taken. He asked the detectives to even put a tracking device on him so they could keep tabs on him, because he knew he was going to be a target. He kept saying it. He kept saying, I need to get out of here. I need to leave the state. I feel like I'm going to die. I need y'all help with leaving, because if I don't, I'm going to be taken out.
I'm nervous, man. Man, look, I'm trying to help y'all, bro. Solve all these murders, bro. Damn, man, I got so much to tell y'all, bro. And I want you to put me on GPS. Can you give me a GPS?
Why do you need a GPS?
So these motherfuckers won't come down there and kill me? That's why I'm going to California with my sister. Can you get me there, please?
I'm not going to be able to get you on a bus tonight. I can tell you that.
Look at me, man. I'm hurt. I'm scarred from the streets.
Get something on your stomach. Did you take anything today?
No, I didn't take none of that, bro.
Are you supposed to take anything?
Y'all supposed to take my ADHD.
How come you're not? You haven't been taking that, have you?
No, I haven't. That's why I'm anxious. I'm doing the right thing. I'm sure I'm gonna die, cuz.
You're gonna die if you keep living like this.
I know.
I don't want you to die.
Anything you want, I'll give it to me, but I gotta go to California. I gotta go.
I just need to know who shot your friend
Who?
tonight. Who shot
him?
Yeah.
I'm
Who
telling you.
pulled the trigger?
Look me in my eyes. I'm gonna tell you right now. Teddy.
You saw him shoot.
Yes.
And you can see that the detective is frustrated with Courtney. He's not really taking heed to what Courtney is saying, because Courtney isn't on his meds, and he's pretty dismissive to Courtney's pleas for help. In response to Courtney's plea for help on getting to California, the detective tells him, well, I can't get you on no bus tonight. And Courtney is like, no, I need a plane. And the detective kind of just gives him this blank stare. Courtney made it very clear that his life was in danger. He was in fear, and he asked for help on getting up out of Dodge. And due to his frantic behavior, his concerns were brushed off. This will be important to remember for later. Now, when Courtney tells the detective that this guy named Teddy is the one who shot Carl, the detective goes and pulls up some info on Teddy, including a photo, comes back into the room and shows the photo to Courtney. And sure enough, Courtney confirmed that this was Teddy in the photo. At this point, Courtney is visibly, increasingly becoming more fidgety, more anxious, saying how, he needs his meds, he needs to see his mom, he needs to see his kids, and he repeats that he needs to get to California and he wants to be tracked by the police to ensure he's being looked over. Detective White is visibly frustrated. He's feeling like I probably can't even take his word for anything because he's not on his meds. He's all over the place, and he couldn't just get a warrant for this Teddy guy based solely on Courtney's word. So at this point, as Courtney is laying on the floor, Detective White tells him, you know what? Go home. Go get some rest. Take your meds. Lay low at your mother's house. Don't be outside roaming the streets. And when you sober up and you're medicated, then we can talk. And Courtney got up, he put on his clothes, he agreed to what Detective White told him, and he went on his way.
I just need my daughter. That's all I want. My daughter, California, and the GPS, so they won't track me but y'all. Please, man. I need my medicine. I'm ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenic. I need to go to my mama. I just gotta get some sleep, bro, and make sure my mama all right.
Now, keep in mind, the detectives told him to lay low at his mother's house because that's also important to remember for later. Now, the girl who took Carl's car keys from Courtney, showed up to the police station to give her account on what role she played in all this. And it gives some clarity as to how all this even started. So according to the young lady, she said she's known Courtney, who was just 23 years old at the time, since they were 15 years old. And he had a child with one of her best friends. So when she saw Courtney pulling up to the apartment complex in the gold Monte Carlo, swerving and driving in a way that could put other people's lives at risk as well as his own, she approached him when he got out the car because she thought it was his car. And she said, she was like, she knew that he was high. Remember, this is somebody that she's known for a whole 8 years. So she already knew when he was under the influence. So she's like, nah. She takes the keys from him and she tells him, like, go sober up. And once you sober up, you can get the keys back. Whole time not even knowing that the car belonged to somebody else, and Courtney didn't tell her that. So when she took the keys from him, she left in her own vehicle, not thinking nothing of it. And when she gets back to the apartment complex, people were asking her if she was okay, and she was confused, like, yeah, I'm good, like, what y'all talking about? And that's when she learned about what happened to Carl. So you see, Courtney had went back and told Carl about what happened with these keys, but he didn't tell him everything. He didn't tell Carl that the girl left the complex. He told Carl that the person who took his keys was in some apartment, to which I believe, him being so high, he gave Carl the wrong information, not even thinking about what could have happened, ahead of time. Plus, when Courtney, Carl, and Carl's girlfriend were on their way to the apartment complex to get the keys back, Courtney was in the car, getting real froggy, like, oh, they trying to play me, F out of here, just talking spicy. And the girlfriend said that's how Courtney was anyway. He was always so animated. But, imagine Carl hearing all that, probably really thinking somebody done violated his little mans and his car keys done got taken in the process of all that. So really, this whole thing was just a big misunderstanding that damn near took Carl's life when you think about the grand scheme of things. But thankfully, Carl was in the hospital on the road to recovery. But this entire ordeal is nowhere near over. Police still wanted to talk to Carl to get his side of the story, and they also wanted to speak to Courtney while he was sober and coherent. But before they could even speak to any of these guys, they get a phone call from a man stating that he was in the apartment when the shooting went down. So they asked him if he could come into the station for an interview. The man agrees. He shows up. Once in the interview room, this guy says not only was he there, but he was the one who pulled the trigger. You see, from what this guy was saying, it was him, his girlfriend, 2 other ladies, and the 5 children in the apartment. He says he had just walked in the door, locked the door, going inside of the apartment, and that's when he heard the kicking at the door. Boom, boom, boom. He says he goes back to the door to see, who's kicking his door. And he could hear the window to his bedroom get busted out. So now at this point, he halfway opens the door and see Carl standing there. So the guy says to Carl, like, yo, I got kids in here. Like, what's going on? Which is what Courtney said as well. He said the guy who opened the door did mention children being in the house. So this guy says that Carl responds like, man, F those kids. And then he barges into the apartment. So the detectives are asking him like, okay, did anybody in this apartment even know Carl personally? And the man is like, no, nobody even knew who he was. So for him, it's like, okay, the strange man who barging into his apartment after kicking his door and busting his window out. Kids is in the house, women in the house, everybody's scared, they screaming. So at this point, he feeling like he gotta, protect the household, especially as the man of the house. So the detectives ask him like, did you know what he was there for? And the guy's like, no, I didn't know at the time, but later on, I found out it was about some keys, but I don't know nothing about no keys or nothing. So as Carl barges into the apartment, the guy says that he runs into his bedroom to grab his gun because he kept it under the mattress. By the time he's turning around, Carl is standing right there at the bedroom door. And so, that's when he just shot him several times. Boom, boom, boom. And he said, I was wrong for leaving the scene. I left because I was scared. But once all my nerves calmed down, I realized I'm not even in the wrong. I was protecting my home and my loved ones. It was either going to be him or me. And he said, like, if I could do it all over again, I still would have shot him because of the way he went about it. The only different thing that he would have done was stayed at the scene. He said he hated that it had to happen like that, but pretty much it is what it is. So at this point, detectives say that everything this man was telling them is pretty consistent with the evidence at the scene. And just to jump ahead a bit and close this part of the story out, the man was never charged with anything. Prosecutors determined that this man shot out of self-defense and he wouldn't be facing any consequences. So that's that with that. But stay with me because things just get worse from here. Now, at this point, the detectives are still wanting to speak to Courtney because even though they didn't do much to help Courtney when he expressed being in fear for his life, they were still concerned about him because they hadn't heard from Courtney. They're like, hoping that he did as they told him, which was to stay out the way and lay low at his mother's house. A week passed by after that investigation with the man at the apartment. It was Thursday, November 17th, 2016, and Courtney was reported missing. Now, detectives are nervous. They're like, something probably happened to him just like he said it would. And boom, they get an anonymous call from someone who told them Courtney was deceased. The anonymous caller said they got some information from a woman they know who told them that Courtney's life was taken in the bathroom of a house in Tulsa and that his body was sent out to a town called Summit in Muskogee County, where there's a bunch of hogs and pigs so that the hogs could consume his deceased body. The detectives don't know if this information could be true or if someone could just be goofing off and trolling, but at the same time, they had to consider that some people did believe that Courtney set Carl up to be eliminated, and they could have wanted retaliation for what happened to Carl. So detectives called Courtney's mom, Deborah, to see if she's seen or heard from her son, and she tells them no, she hadn't seen or heard from Courtney since November 10th, 2 days after Carl got shot. And she was worried sick because she normally spoke to him every day. They called his sister in California to see if she spoke to him, but she said she hadn't heard from him either. They checked his social media to see if he'd been active, but nothing. So now detectives are feeling like there just might be some truth to that anonymous call they got, but they're still hoping for the best. Now, investigators were able to obtain the woman's address who gave the anonymous tipster this information about Courtney being deceased and fed to hogs. So they went to her house to pick her up and bring her back to the station for an interview to find out how does she know this information. Once in the station, the woman says that another woman by the name of Charlita, aka Charlie, was the one who told her about Carl getting shot and people believing that Courtney set Carl up. She then says that Charlita told her straight up that she lied to Courtney and lured him to come over to her house on November 10th, which is the last time that Deborah said she heard from her son. So apparently, Charlita lured Courtney to her apartment, and once he got there, Charlita got him high so that he could start spilling information about what happened to Carl while he was under the influence, because at the time, Carl couldn't talk to anybody while he was in the hospital. So the woman says at that point, she asks Charlita like, well, okay, where even is Courtney? And Charlita just tells her, well, nobody got to worry about him no more. The woman says she just got this really bad feeling when Charlita told her that, but she didn't know what it meant exactly. And at that point, she had no idea where Courtney could be. So detectives just gave her their contact information and told her to reach out if she came across any more info. So now with this Charlita woman's name being brought up, Charlita Mack to be precise, who was 39 years old at the time, police began looking into who she was, and her rap sheet came up, which consisted of multiple convictions, including larceny and harboring a fugitive. So detectives make a plan to get to the home where Charlita lived to search her home with an active search warrant. When they get there, they bang on the door and tell Charlita open up the door because they had a search warrant. There were other occupants in the house, and the police told them to step out. As the police went inside the home, on the surface, things looked normal. But then when they headed into the bathroom, because remember, the anonymous caller told them that Courtney was taken out in a bathroom in the house, the chemical luminol was used in the bathroom, which is a chemical used to detect blood that wasn't completely cleaned up and isn't visible to the plain eye. It was used, and under the black light, sure enough, the bathroom lit up. There were traces of blood splatter all over the bathroom. Police take Charlita, her 18-year-old son, his girlfriend, a young woman named Jeanette, all to the station in cuffs for questioning. They start with questioning Jeanette first. When they sit Jeanette down, they tell her like, look, we took a look at your record. It's clean. You don't see that often. So don't dirty up your record trying to lie to us. Just be honest about anything you know pertaining to Courtney. And they show her a photo of Courtney asking if she knows him. She's like, yeah, I know him, but I hadn't seen him since Halloween at Charlita's house. They tell her how Courtney is missing and possibly deceased, and the rumor is that his life was taken at the house she's living at, Charlita's house. Jeanette's jaw drops. She's like, what? Oh my God, wow. Like, it's her first time hearing about this. She's saying, all I know is Courtney is missing because I saw it in the news, but anything other than that, I don't know nothing about. Detectives are like, okay, and they let her go. So now they move on to Charlita's 18-year-old son, and they get straight to the nitty gritty with him. They don't ask him if he knows Courtney. They're like, how do you know Courtney? And he says Courtney is his cousin's baby father. They ask him if he knows Carl. He says yes, and he heard about Carl getting shot and that Courtney is the one who set him up to get shot. The detectives are like, okay, now what did you hear about Courtney? And he says all he knows is what he sees on social media, people posting statuses about Courtney's disappearance. At this point, detectives are tired of pussyfooting around, and they pull out the images of the blood splatter under the luminol in black light, and they show it to the young man, and they're like, listen, we had a search warrant for your home. We found this blood in your bathroom. The son gets all choked up, and detectives are like, look, you're young. You don't want to ruin your life like this. Tell us the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So he cracks. He's like, I'm not about to go to jail for nobody else. And he tells them everything he knows. He explains to detectives that it was about 10 or 11 p.m. on November 10th. It was him, his girl, Jeanette, his mama, Charlita, Charlita's homeboy, Gerald, and Gerald's girlfriend, who had been staying in Charlita's house for a couple days, and Courtney, that were all in the house. The young man says he was in his room chilling when he all of a sudden heard a man screaming. He said he got up, left his room to see what was going on, and that's when he saw Courtney in the bathtub. In the bathroom with Courtney was Gerald and his girlfriend. He said Gerald's girlfriend was steadily yelling while standing over Courtney in the tub, saying, "You got my cousin shot. You got my cousin shot," talking about Carl. And the girl just started beating on him. He said it just got worse from there. Apparently, Gerald's girlfriend left to go and get some ice from the store. And when she got back, they made Courtney sit in the tub with freezing cold water and the ice. He said he could hear Courtney begging them to please let him get out of the tub, saying that he was freezing cold. And Gerald and his girlfriend was just like, nope. You ain't getting out the tub. The young man said he asked the couple, like, why are y'all wilding like this? And they told him, well, Carl can't talk right now, so he ain't going to be able to talk either. He said this was going on all night, all the way to the morning. And that's when they took Courtney's body out of the tub, wrapped him up, and put him inside of some type of like large tub bin thing. Then they placed him in the back of the white pickup truck and drove off. But he wasn't sure where they went. After talking to Charlita's son, detectives go into the interview room with Charlita Mack to question her. And with her, they have zero patience. They're like, look, we already know that you know Courtney, and don't even try to BS us because your son already started talking, so you may as well tell the truth. So Charlita is like, look, Courtney pulled up to my house so we can toot some lines, the powder. And the detective is like, well, we heard you lured him to your house with drugs purposely. And she's like, what? No, that's not what happened. She's swearing up and down. He came over there on his own accord because according to her, that's something he always did. He always just would pop up randomly over at her house. So she's like, Courtney is over there. He's talking loud at the front of the house, being his usual self. And that's when Gerald's girlfriend comes out from the back room and sees Courtney sitting on the couch. Charlita said the girl knew who Courtney was because they used to be involved with each other. So as Courtney is sitting on the couch, Gerald's girlfriend climbs on top of him and she's angry. She's grabbing onto Courtney's face. She's shouting. And then that's when out of nowhere, she takes a blade and slices his face. Courtney starts bleeding everywhere. Charlita says she stepped in and was like, hey, you gotta chill, but the woman wouldn't stop. And this is when both Gerald and his girlfriend take Courtney to the bathroom and start torturing him. Charlita said when she went to her bathroom, there was blood splattered all over the bathroom. She said Courtney had even looked up at her at one point while he was in the tub, and she could just see his face looking like just so messed up. Charlita said she went back to her room while all this was going on, and a few hours later, she came out of her room to check on Courtney, but that's when she saw Gerald and Courtney tussling in her hallway. She said Gerald had him in a chokehold trying to choke him out, and Courtney was gasping for air. This is when Gerald's girlfriend comes over to where the men were, and with cowboy boots on, she begins stomping Courtney out over and over and over again until Courtney was no longer making any other sounds and there was no longer a struggle. She said Gerald's girlfriend then went, got some big trash bags. They placed one bag over Courtney's upper body and another on the lower part of his body, and then they carried him out. When the detectives asked her who cleaned up the bathroom, Charlita admitted that she cleaned up her own bathroom. They asked her what did Gerald's girlfriend look like and what was her name. But Charlita said she didn't know because the girl had on a hoodie that kind of hid her face, and she wasn't aware of the girl's name, which to me was suspicious because you don't know what she looks like, don't know her name, but you knew her enough to know that she used to deal with Courtney. Charlita literally sat there in her own home and allowed these people to torture Courtney and did nothing to help him. Didn't call police or nothing, just sat there high off drugs, ignoring the police, screams and cries of a frail young man being pulverized right there in her bathroom. During further investigation, detectives were able to obtain surveillance at the gas station that Gerald's girlfriend went and got the ice from. And as they're viewing the footage, they see the girlfriend enter the store, but she wasn't alone and she wasn't with Gerald. She was actually accompanied by Charlita's son's girlfriend, Jeanette. Now remember, Jeanette told the detectives she had no idea what happened to Courtney. She hadn't seen him since Halloween. She only heard about him missing via the news and blah, 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 blah. But here you are on camera with ice bags in your hand while Courtney is literally sitting in the tub in the home you live in being tortured for hours and hours, caught in a lie. Also in the surveillance was the white truck that Courtney had been put inside of after being tortured. So the detectives decided to take a trip down to the town of Summit in Muscogee County, where it was rumored that Courtney had been fed to hogs and pigs, to see if they could find the white truck over there. When they get there, they don't find the white truck, but they do see all throughout the town there were pigs and hogs all over. Literally at every turn, you saw the hogs out there just eating that trash and scraps, which spoke to the idea that Courtney may have very well been fed to the hogs and pigs. And keep these hogs and pigs in mind because the rumors will play a very crucial part in this story later on. Now, detectives head back to Tulsa. They make more attempts at finding Jeanette since they've learned she lied to them, but to no avail. In the midst of this, they get a call that Gerald has been located and he's with a girl named Tierra. Immediately, they're like, okay, bet, this Tierra girl must be the girlfriend. They look into the database system to see if they can find an image or a record for her, but they didn't come up with anything other than a report that was made by her against an ex-boyfriend for vandalism. And who was the ex-boyfriend? Courtney Palmer. Now, remember, Charlita already told them that Gerald's girlfriend was once involved with Courtney. So detectives are like, oh yeah, this Tierra girl is definitely Gerald's lady. This must be the girl that was on the surveillance at the gas station. So they head on over to the address that was given to them to finally speak to this Tierra girl and had their warrant in hand. They knock on the door, ask for Tierra. Tierra comes out. They show her the warrant and a printout of a still image of the woman at the gas station. And the still image isn't very clear because, as you know, surveillance cameras can be pretty grainy. So black woman in the still image, black woman in front of them, ex-boyfriend is Courtney Palmer. They're assuming that this is their girl. Whole time, it's not. Detectives get hit with a curveball because Tierra looks at the image and she's like, that's not me. That's Ayla. So now we have a new character. This is the first time detectives are hearing the name Ayla. Tierra tells the detectives her full name is Michaela Riddle, and she and her boyfriend, Gerald, had moved into her apartment about a month prior, but they moved out days ago, which makes sense because remember, Gerald and who we now know as Michaela, was living with Charlita for some days. Tierra tells the detectives, like, I'm glad I could finally speak on all the things that Michaela told me because I've been wanting to get this off my chest. I just didn't know who to turn to. So they all head over to the station and Tierra's like, yeah, her and Courtney had dated at one point, but they had a falling out, so they broke up, but she hadn't heard from him since the breakup. And it was really bothering her because they spoke all the time. She said during a conversation with Michaela told her, well, you're never going to see Courtney again. And Tierra said, she asked her, like, what you mean by that? That's what Michaela told her, like, this is about to be some first 48 stuff. And the wicked irony in that being that this is really on the first 48. Detectives asked Tierra if she knew where Gerald and Michaela would be living at that moment, and she said no, but she was able to provide them with Michaela's phone number. So detectives start investigating to see if they could find Michaela based on her phone records, and the plan was to arrest Michaela, Gerald, and Jeanette on assault and battery with an attempt to commit homicide. And I say an attempt to commit homicide because at this time, Courtney's body still hadn't been found. Now, based on Michaela's phone records, they were led to a pretty broad Boulevard general area and decided they'd hit the grounds and search for as long as they needed to until they came across Michaela or that white pickup truck or Gerald or all three. And lo and behold, they end up finding the truck. So now at this point, detectives call in more officers so they can stake outside to watch the truck and see if Michaela or Gerald will come outside at some point. While all this is happening, detectives get a phone call that Jeanette came into the station wanting to speak. Detectives head back to the station. Jeanette is there and she's like, look, I know I lied, but I was scared. The truth is, we were all in Charlitte's house getting high. I was there when Courtney got there, but I fell asleep. When I woke up, Charlotte told me to go to the store to get some ice with Michaela. I agreed to it, not knowing what the ice was for. When we got back, I put the ice on the counter. Then Michaela took the bags of ice and just launched it at Courtney's head while he was in the tub. Jeanette went on to say the beatings that Courtney endured just kept getting worse and worse. She said he was tortured, beat with hands, feet, the bags of ice. He had hot water on him. He was in cold water with the ice. And then she just started to cry when she talked about how Courtney was begging and pleading for his life to be spared. She recounted how she heard him just saying, please, 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 and saying how he didn't do it. He had nothing to do with Carl's shooting, but they just wouldn't stop. Jeanette said she just went into the room, turned the TV volume up because she didn't want to see or hear what they were doing to Courtney. She said she asked Charlotte, like, why did it have to go so far? And Charlotte just told her, like, it had already gotten so bad, they just had to finish what they started. Grown-ass Charlotte, not even trying to protect the integrity of her home or those teens because she was high out of her mind. No help for Courtney. No humanity whatsoever. They took Jeanette into custody and they put an arrest warrant out for Charlotte. Now, back at the location of the white pickup truck, which was outside of Brigton Apartments, an intelligence analyst who was staking outside was able to locate Gerald's uncle and the apartment he and Gerald was staying at. So in the evening hours, police make their move into the apartment with their search warrant in hand and find both Gerald and Michaela in the apartment and place them under arrest. When officers entered the apartment, they found the sweater they saw Michaela wearing in the surveillance the night she went to get ice from the store. Michaela was heated. She was so mad that there were so many cameras in her face. She was cursing police out, telling them to get the cameras out her face because remember, this is all being filmed for the first 48 episodes. And she carried that attitude all the way to the station. When she got into the interview room, she was real dismissive and denied everything the police threw at her. They told her what her charges would be. She said she didn't know why she was getting charged because she didn't do anything. Denied knowing Charlotte, denied knowing Jeanette, denied knowing Courtney, said she got nothing to do with nothing, denied that it was her in the surveillance at the gas station even though they showed her herself on camera with the sweater on that they found in the apartment. She just denied everything, but never asked for an attorney. She instead asked to be taken to her cell so she could lay down. And it appeared to me like she was high on the powder because she had that Coca-Cola jaw going on, if you know what I mean. And while she was talking to the detectives, Detective White got so frustrated with her nonchalant demeanor, he called her pathetic after going back and forth with her. And he described her as unremorseful with no regard for human life. That pathetic jab must have really got under Michaela's skin because she started calling him a woman to try and offend him, but he ended up just leaving her in the interview room by herself. And then they moved on to talk to Gerald. But their attempt at talking to Gerald fell flat. First of all, he kept shifting back and forth in his seat, looking super uncomfortable, and said that he had a wicked stomach ache. The detectives told him they wanted to ask him some questions, but he declined to speak without the presence of an attorney. So they said, okay, we'll just let you know that we're charging you with assault, battery, kidnapping, and an intent to commit homicide. And remember, it's still just attempt at this point since they still hadn't found Courtney's body. But they did tell him the charges was in regards to Courtney. And Gerald was acting all shocked and surprised, talking about that was his man's, that was his partner. The nerve and audacity of him to refer to himself as a friend of any kind to Courtney. The detectives placed Gerald in cuffs, and that was it for Gerald at the moment. So now detectives shift their attention back to finding Courtney now that they have the main suspects in custody. And what they did next had proven to be a very smart move. Remember, I told y'all to keep the idea of the hogs and pigs in your back pocket because it would be significant in the story later. Well, police decided that they would release the information about Courtney possibly being fed to the hogs and pigs in Muskogee County to the media in hopes that someone would come forward with some kind of information that'll help them in locating Courtney. You see, they never released that information to the public before, so with this information now being public, boom, an anonymous caller called the detectives to let them know that Gerald had lived in the area near him in Muskogee for about 6 months before he had moved. He said around the time Courtney went missing, he saw Gerald come back in the area in a white pickup truck with a tall female with him, and they had taken something out of the truck but said they were just cleaning out their truck. So the next morning on Thursday, December 15, 2016, after that anonymous tip, Tulsa homicide detectives were joined by forensic anthropologists with Oklahoma State Medical Examiner's Office to process the scene. They headed out to the property they were tipped off about, and sure enough, they made the unfortunate discovery of Courtney's deceased body. Courtney hadn't been fed to pigs and hogs. That was just a rumor. However, his body was badly burned and thrown in a ditch. The body had been burned so badly, his remains looked like literal charcoal. Police had to make the unfortunate phone call to his mother to let her know that they believed they found Courtney's body deceased. And I use the term believed because, of course, they had to identify the remains first before confirming, in which eventually medical examiners did confirm that, yes, it was Courtney's body. Gerald pled guilty to charges of desecrating a human corpse, committing a gang-related offense, kidnapping, and first-degree homicide. District Judge Sharon Holmes sentenced Gerald to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Michaela was convicted of second-degree homicide and was sentenced to 49 years. She filed for an appeal on multiple grounds with the Oklahoma Court of Appeals, but she was denied, rightfully so. Carlita pled guilty to being an accessory to homicide, earning a 2-year prison sentence and 18 years under the Oklahoma Department of Corrections supervision. On November 7th, 2017, Jeanette's homicide charges against her had been dropped. Courtney's mom, Deborah, got him cremated. She expressed how much she was going to miss her baby boy. She remembered Courtney as just being funny and a joy, saying how he missed his calling card to be a comedian. She said he's up in heaven now doing his thing, keeping the angels laughing, and said that God needed him more. This whole entire story was so unfortunate. Just one big misunderstanding that led to a man almost being eliminated because, to be honest, he went about it the wrong way for real. You don't go to nobody's home, regardless of the situation, looking for static, unarmed at that, can't even defend yourself for real, kicking on doors, busting out windows. You got your lady waiting on you right outside, and you talking about F them kids while you in another man's home that you never saw a day in your life. So when it comes to Carl, he better thank God that he's still here for real. And this one big misunderstanding that led to the horrifying torture and death of a young man who begged police for help in getting away because he knew his life was on the line, who begged and pleaded with the ones who took his life to spare his life, all while knowing he was about to die. The brain on drugs is a terrible thing. Everyone involved in this story were all on drugs. We know that being under the influence impairs your better judgment. And Courtney was too high to realize he walked Carl right into a situation that almost cost him his life. And Charlita, her son, and Jeanette were too high to get Courtney any help as he laid there screaming, begging, and pleading in that bathtub. And as for the police, law enforcement really needs to do a better job at taking people's safety concerns more seriously. How many times have we heard that someone's DV concerns weren't taken seriously until it was too late? Or someone's stalking situation wasn't taken seriously until it was too late? Or someone who witnessed something who was afraid they'd be sought after wasn't taken seriously until it was too late. I understand that they instructed Courtney to lay low, but he asked them for help, and they ignored his direct request for a trip to California, all because he wasn't on his meds and he was high. They didn't take him seriously at all. And if they forever feel guilt for that, it serves them right. Demons are walking around in human vessels. Children are growing up without a father. A mother has lost her son. And no, Courtney didn't deserve the torture that he endured. He didn't deserve to lose his life the way that he did. The whole entire situation could have been avoided. It never had to go as far as it did. It was never that serious, for real. An unpopular opinion, but if Courtney's demise weighed heavy on Carl's heart and soul every waking moment of his life, it would serve him right. I do send my deepest condolences to Courtney's mom, his children, their mothers, and everyone else who loved him. Rest in peace, Courtney Palmer. May your spirit reside with your loved ones forever. You'll never be forgotten.